This is the story of the old Houston 146.88 and 444.60 ham radio repeaters. This video is of a trip up the tower to service the repeaters. The trip up the Houston, KHOU, Channel 11, 1,500-foot TV tower, originally the Channel 2 tower, took place around the early 1990s. Not sure of the date or the exact reason for the trip, but repeaters do require a lot of maintenance. The trip up the tower was accomplished via an elevator, which originated from a platform situated approximately 20 feet above ground level. Access to this platform required climbing a ladder. The elevator car was compact. There was only room inside for either one person or two smaller people that were good friends, or you could carry additional passengers on the top of the elevator car. The journey to the top of the tower lasted around 20 minutes. The ride was a slow and somewhat creaky ascent, while the descent took approximately 15 minutes. At the top of the tower, there was a large, triangular platform measuring about 60 feet on each side. The elevator operated within the three supporting legs of the tower and arrived inside a small structure on the platform at the top, usually referred to as the doghouse. This building featured two levels connected by a ladder. The upper level housed the repeaters, necessitating an additional climb to get the repeaters along with any necessary tools and equipment up to that level. In this video, you can see the open cabinet containing both repeaters, the power supply, the repeater controllers, and the 444.60 cavity filters, with the 146.88 cavity filter positioned just outside the cabinet. The repeaters were GE Master Executive 2 mobile transceivers that were solid-state models converted for use as repeaters, with repeater control managed by SCOM 5K controllers. These units replaced older GE Master Progress Line mobile radios, which featured tube drivers and finals and were housed in separate cabinets complete with power supplies. Each repeater weighed around 70 pounds. The repeater equipment was located inside the two-story doghouse at the top of the tower, specifically on the second floor. Inside a rack cabinet were the repeaters, power supply, SCOM controllers, and cavity filters. The antennas were Phelps Dodge collinear type, inside of a fiberglass shell, and were about 21 feet long. The transmit antennas were mounted at the very top of the tower, while the receive antennas were positioned 100 feet below. This created vertical separation to help prevent the transmitters from interfering and desensing the receivers. The following is a portion of the history of the 146.88 repeater in Houston from the time we took over management and maintenance of the repeaters for a period of about 10 years from the mid-80s to the mid-90s. This account was written by my father, Byron, W5LGQ. After I retired from Channel 39 in 1982, I made my dream come true by moving to Sargent, Texas to spend most of my time fishing. The next priority was to put up a tower so I could use the repeaters in Houston. Several years passed and my passion for fishing cooled a little, so I found other things to do. I was listening to Fred, K5MJA, and Frank, K5BQY, on 881 afternoon, and they were talking about some problems with the repeater. I listened for a while and then broke in and casually asked if there was anything that I could do to help. I soon realized that I had set a trap for myself, because after 20 years they were looking for somebody to carry the load for a while. After some gentle arm twisting, I agreed to become the trustee of the 146.88 and the 444.60 repeaters. That was July 10, 1987. We knew that the repeaters had a few problems, but we needed to take a good look at what we had gotten ourselves into. So Don, K5IXJ, my son, who would make many trips to the tower in the next 10 years, made his first trip up the tower to bring both of the repeaters down. This was the start of an interesting 10 years. After we got the old repeaters down, we contacted Steve, K5LTK, who had been doing most of the maintenance, to get the spare parts and the documentation of the repeaters and also get a few pointers. Jerry, K5IHK, also was very helpful in getting over the rough spots. It took a while to learn the ins and outs of the repeaters, but the day finally came to put them back into service. Then Don was making his second trip up the tower. This time it was to reinstall the repeaters. After making a few on the air tests, we realized that we already had hams standing by waiting for the word to go, so we turned them loose. Everything was fine for several years, with only a few trips to replace relays and tubes until we ran out of good tubes. Often with day and night operation, the tubes wouldn't last very long. We had a wake-up call when we went looking for replacement tubes and found that they were in short supply. That's when we began thinking of replacing the repeaters with all solid-state surplus commercial mobile radios. GE Master Executive 2 mobile transceivers seemed to be the most promising option. We put out the word, and before long, Alan Fox, K5LKJ, on a Hamfest trip to Austin came up with 2 Executive 2s for 2 meters, and it wasn't long before we had 2 more for UHF. So now we had the radios. We needed to build 4 repeaters because we wanted to have a spare repeater for each frequency. We soon got pointed in the right direction to make repeaters out of them. Even though we got a lot of basic advice, I still had to convert the radios for duplex operation and interface them to the other equipment. The SCOM controllers sure did make our life much easier because I only had to supply inputs and outputs to it and it would do the rest. It gave us call sign ID, squelch delay, timeout timer, PTT, adjustable audio in and out, transmit on and off, and PL tone input. These could be activated remotely without the need for a phone line. First, we had to compile a list of material that we would need to build 4 repeaters. One 12-volt power supply that would deliver 35 to 40 amps. Supplied by W5GBR. 2 SCOM 5K controllers. 4 receive crystals. 4 transmit crystals. 2 TS32PL tone boards. This looks like a pretty short list, but just wait until you get the bill. On March 23, 1991, Don installed the new repeaters and retired the old ones after 20 years of service. Submitted by Byram Huddleston, W5LGQ, and Don Huddleston, K5IXJ. The following is the history of the 2 repeaters starting from their very beginning and through the 20 years prior and up until our taking them over. The following story below was written by Leon Weiss, W5VCE back in 1968. And was furnished by Fred Look, K5MJA. History of the Houston Radio Relay Club and Repeater Station. The date of this writing is May 7, 1968. This will explain why some of the early dates are difficult to establish. It should be mentioned also that great care was taken to avoid publicity, written records, and any specific knowledge of a repeater station in Houston prior to July 14, 1966. It is difficult to establish what triggered the interest in 2-meter FM. There were a dozen or so stations operating on 147.30 MHz FM around January 1, 1965. This activity was primarily started by Pasadena for races. At about this time, Bill, WA5BSB, and Jerry, K5IHK, turned up with Bendix FM rigs with 146.88 MHz crystals. A small group started looking for rigs to start a new FM frequency for Houston. We finally got Motorola to agree to let us have 9 FMTRU ADDS for $30 each, as is, while Carl, WA5ABA, was in Dallas attending a service school. Carl brought the rigs back to Houston and the serious work of the new net began. These 9 rigs were obtained February 25, 1965. 30 more were obtained March 26, 1965. Bill, WA5BSB, Forrest, WA5BSD, and Jerry, K5IHK, made a trip to Dallas to get the 30 rigs. Ed Bailey got one of these 30, and once we got Ed on 2-meter FM, a repeater wasn't far behind. 8 more rigs were obtained April 23, 1965, then the last 12 on May 25, 1965, making a total of 59 rigs obtained from Motorola. After the first group of rigs were acquired, there was so much interest that it became necessary to keep a list of people who wanted rigs so that as they became available from Motorola, they could be distributed fairly. Jim Shotwell, WA5BUV, got this thankless task of keeping the list and distributing the rigs. By December 6 of 1965 there were 82 active stations on 146.88 MHz FM with 40 mobiles represented. Interest and discussion of a repeater station had developed to a point that a rig was chosen out of the 12 units received May 5, 1965 for conversion to a repeater station. It is difficult to comprehend why there were 24 or more mobile stations by this time, because the range was sure nothing to shout about. Anyway, it was evident that a repeater station was sorely needed for any reasonable mobile performance on 2 meters. For mobile to mobile it was a must. By this time we had Ed, W5SDA, interested in the technical aspects of a repeater, so the unit was turned over to Ed. Everyone who had any of the parts needed to convert the old mobile rig to an AC repeater station contributed to the cause, and crystals were ordered to set the repeater up for 146.28 in and 146.88 out. On approximately May 15, 1965, the repeater was ready for trial, set up at Ed's house. The antenna situation was real Mickey Mouse, but the test was highly successful. Then came the big problem. How could we get this illegal contraption on a high building downtown where it would do some good? Ed finally convinced Bert, W5HJL, into sneaking it up on the Gulf building where he was the engineer of a FM station. This installation occurred in July 1965, as near as I can establish. Just about the time we were getting all the bugs ironed out, we got the news that everything had to be cleared off the Gulf building to make room for the big orange lollipop Gulf sign. The repeater installation had to come down approximately August 1965. This was rather discouraging, but word leaked out that Wiley, K5DFZ, engineer at KPRC, thought it might be possible to get the repeater on the KPRC Channel 2 tower at DeWalt, Texas on the southwest side of Houston. This sounded too good to be true, but sure enough, by September 1965, there it was, 1,500 feet in the air with a solid mobile range of 50 miles. Needless to say, 2-meter FM interest skyrocketed. The nuts who climbed around on that 1,500-foot tower to install antennas were K5DFC, WA5BSB, K5VQI, and W5SDA. Ed took care of the installation and service of the repeater for about 18 months, before the glamour was exhausted. Whereupon, he insisted that some of us mere mortals could do it. He was tired. By this time a spare repeater had been installed with remote switching, and instant servicing was no longer necessary. Ray, W5DLC, took over as chief technician. Everything was going smooth until July 7, 1966, when Dick Vaughn, FCC engineer, swooped down upon us. He insisted that this station emitting such a powerful signal on 146.88 MHz had to have a license. He also mumbled something about wanting to know who he served the violation notices to. When the smoke cleared, Ed, W5SDA, and Leon, W5VCE, were the recipients of real scary violation notices, and the repeater became real silent. In all fairness to Dick, although he wanted to see the repeater operation continue, he just wanted it to be legal. He insisted it wasn't all that difficult to have a license, login ID. During the next week, Ed divided his time equally between reading that scary violation notice and building a robot which sent call letters in CW every 3 minutes. On July 14th, Ed had the robot CW operator in place. Leon had a receiver feeding into the tape machine at police headquarters for logging, and Byram, W5LGQ, had loaned us the Suburban West Amateur Radio Club call, K5YJG/5. Everything was ready. Ed called the FCC office and meekly asked Dick if we could throw the switch. Dick seemed to be satisfied, providing the KPRC engineers acted as attending operators and turn it off when not in attendance. So now we were back in operation again, at least part of the time. The big push now was to get a club formed and get our own license with remote privileges to make for 24-hour operation. Also, something had to be done about securing our own logging recorder. The Houston Radio Relay Club was formed July 20, 1966, with directors as follows: President K5DFC, Vice President WA5BSB, Secretary WA5BUV, Treasurer W5SDA, Programs K5IHK, Membership W5VCE. License was applied for with W5SDA as trustee. As soon as the license returned, we were able to go to full period operation, since we now had remote control privileges. A tape recorder was found and rigged for logging, and the Houston Radio Relay Club now enjoyed a good, legal repeater station. The next several months were not completely uneventful, what with several exercises and a few emergencies proving the repeater to be a community asset, as well as a lot of fun. An election of new officers on January 31, 1968, brought the following group into office: President K5VQY, Vice President K5DFC, Secretary W5SDA, Programs W5DLC, Membership WA5JDI. This brings the background history up to date. There are approximately 230 operators using the repeater at this time. Leon Weiss, W5VCE/W50BC, May 7, 1968. Now fast forward 30 years to the end of our managing and maintaining the repeaters. Sometime in 1997 the tower owners began to make access to the tower much more restrictive and we were no longer able to maintain the repeaters. To continue operation of the repeaters we turned the repeaters over to Mike Hardwick, N5VCX, who works in the communications industry. This gave him access to the tower and he was able to continue maintaining the repeaters for a few more years until the tower owners changed their policies again and ordered all of the non-rent paying ham radio repeaters off of the tower. So after more than 30 years of history as the Houston repeaters with the best coverage for ham radio operators in the greater Houston area, they were now off the air. The 146.88 repeater moved around over the next 25 years, being mostly on a tower in Cat Springs, Texas, far west of Houston and not accessible to most Houston ham radio operators. Then sometime in 2025 Mike, along with other hams, obtained access to a Houston tower and got the 146.88 repeater back up at 1,500 feet again, operating with the call sign WR5AAA. I was not involved in the return of the 88 repeater and do not know any details about the new repeater or what it took to get it operating at its current location or even exactly where it is. But it sure is nice to see it back again operating very much like it did in the old days. That pretty much brings the history of the 146,880 repeater up to date. Dawn, K5IXJ, February, 2026. The rest of the video shows some of the surrounding area, some of the other TV towers nearby, most of them are now 2,000-foot towers. Downtown Houston, the Uptown Galleria area and more views of the tower. At the end of the tower trip video I have added a couple of short videos and some photos of the old GE Progress Line repeaters and the replacement GE Master Executive 2 repeaters that replaced them. The blue cabinet was the old 146.88 repeater and the silver cabinet was the old 444.60 repeater. Inside these cabinets are the GE Progress Line transmitter module and the receiver module, power supply, and the silver box is the call sign ID board. The last picture shows the two old repeaters with one of the replacement GE Master Executive 2 repeaters and one of the SCOM controllers sitting on top of them. You can see this was a big improvement in just size and weight as well as reliability and maintenance and eliminated the cost of having to find and buy new tubes.